Hello and welcome, I'm your Kodmaki. Here let's learn how to build some nice character customization. The player can choose all kinds of different visuals to customize their character. They can pick anything and then they can load into game using their custom character with their customization. We're going to build the scenes from scratch, and then you can also download the complete project files from the link in the description. That is literally the exact same final code that I'm using in my game, Dinky Guardians. And I'm also going to cover how I handled synchronizing the customization in multiplayer in my game. Now, this topic is actually a tricky one because there's a million ways you can do something like this. And basically all of those ways are all going to be dependent on how your assets are set up. In a previous video, I already talked about 4 separate ways you can do that. You can change the material, you can change the entire mesh, or you can add parts with a skin mesh render or just as a regular prefab. Also, quick mention, the Cinti store is having their Black Friday sale. If you want to pick up the modular character pack that I showed in that video, check out the link in the description before the sale ends. You can use roughly the same logic that I'm going to showcase in this video with that asset. It's a slightly different method, but the logic is mostly the same. So if you like the Cinti style, check out the Cinti store link in the description. Now in this video, I'm actually going to do a step-by-step tutorial on another different method. The method we're going to use is based on swapping out individual meshes for each body part. The reason for why I chose this method wasn't really chosen by me, it was based on the asset pack that I'm using. So I'm going to showcase exactly how I handle player customization in my game, which by the way, the game is actually out now on Steam. So if you like some automation, colony building, and defense mechanics, then check it out with the link in the description. So here is the character customization just like I have in my game. So I've got a character right here, and I've got all kinds of buttons to change all kinds of parts. So I can change the player color, I change basically the skin color, I can modify the hat that the player is wearing, I can also remove it if I want, and then play around with the various hairstyles. I can swap out the shirt, I can swap out the pants, the shoes, and so on. So as you can see, I can modify pretty much anything and get near endless variation. Then after I customize my own character, I can save the character. And when I go to play a game, yep, here I am using my custom character in-game. So let's build a system exactly like I have it in my game. Now, like I said, the various ways to handle character customization are going to be dependent on how exactly your assets are set up. Here is the asset pack that I'm going to be using in this tutorial, and I also use it in my game. Which, by the way, this asset is actually currently on sale live right now on the Black Friday sale on the Unity Asset Store. This is a great pack for making near infinite amount of variations as long as you're looking for a cartoony stylized style. This pack has tons of body parts, tons of colors. I think all the characters look really great, really nice. So if you need it, go ahead and get it while the Black Friday sale is still live. The downloadable project files that I made, those were made using this asset. Now naturally, I cannot include this actual asset in the project files. I didn't make this asset, so I cannot distribute it. But if you open the project files and then you load this asset on the same project, everything should load correctly. Okay, so let's make our character customization system. Here I've got the character 7 asset in my project, and inside I've got the basic character. There's a mesh and there's a nice prefab. Then if I go inside, I can see all of the various body parts to see how it's actually set up. It's got all the various body parts right here. Like for example, here is the body. And then basically they set up different meshes that have different UVs on the vertices. So the whole thing uses just a single material with a single texture. All of the body parts use the same material. And then the colors are essentially handled over here by the mesh. So if I go, there's this body mesh and you can see the body is in yellow. Then swap to the next one and now it's in blue. There's another blue, a brown, red, yellow, and so on. So in order to swap the color of the player or in order to swap any of these attachments, in order to do that, I simply modify the mesh and don't touch the materials at all. This is honestly a pretty clever way to do it. There's no need to worry about bones or materials or anything. Just swap out this one mesh field and everything works great. So really the more complex part of the system is just setting up the UI and figuring out how to manage all this data. Everything else is actually pretty simple. So here I've got my demo scene and I just dragged my character prefab. Then I also place the camera just looking at it, which by the way, here's a quick tip for positioning a camera. You can position the scene camera wherever you want it, like let's say like this. And then you can select the character game object, or literally any game object, and you can press the shortcut Ctrl, Shift, and F, and that basically orients the selected game object based on the orientation of the camera on the scene window. So just a fun, quick way to easily position cameras or really any object. Okay, so that's my scene setup, and here is my canvas, and it's set up as I normally do. So screen space overlay, then on the canvas scaler, it's set up to scale with the screen size. For the reference resolution, I use 1080p just like I always do, and finally match with the height. So really the same setup that I always use. And now inside, let's begin by making our UI window. So let's create an empty one. Let's name this the character customization UI. Now inside, let's add a new UI image. This is going to be the background. And just for fun, over here in the project files, I also have a nice background from another Space UI pack. This is the same one that I used in my game, so I'm going to use this, but of course you can use whatever UI visual you want. So I'm just going to drag this. Let's also make it stretch to occupy the entire parent, so select it to stretch, put everything on 0, 0, and let's modify the size of the parent itself. Then just make some simple elements. So let's make a text. Here, let's say character creator. Put it in bold, down the center, everything disabled, width and height both at 0. Let's anchor it to the top and just move it up there. Just a bit of fun. Then for testing, let's begin by making a simple button. So let's go inside, let's create a new UI, make it a button. Let's name this the color button, make it a little bit bigger. And inside for text, let's say color and put it in white. Okay, so there's our super basic setup. Now let's add some logic to it. So first, let's make a script to run it. So let's create a new C# script, call it the same thing. So character customization UI. Let's attach a script to the main game object and open. Okay, so now here, first thing we need is really just a reference to our button. So let's add here, and as always, let's write some good clean code. So make it a serialized field, private of type button, which exists inside Unity engine.ui, and let's call it the color button. By the way, if you don't know what I'm using serialized field private instead of making this public, if you don't know that, then go watch my video. That's a very important topic. Back in the editor, we have our field, so let's drag the color button reference. And over here, let's just add a click event. So let's do a private void awake, and on awake, let's initialize our color button. And let's go into the onClicked event, and let's add a listener, and inside, let's do a quick lambda, just to make it easy. And right now, let's just do debug.log color button. By the way, if you don't know this syntax, this is a lambda, or an anonymous function. It's a type of delegate, and I covered delegates in detail in a previous video. And also, of course, alternatively, you could just come over here, and on the onClick, you could just easily add over here the function. But personally, I prefer to do it through code, but either way works. Okay, so let's do a quick test. The game is playing, there's a character, press the color button, and there you go, we have a log. Okay, so far so good. Now let's handle modifying the character. But as always, we want to write good clean code, meaning we want the character customization to not be dependent on this UI element. For example, later on, let's say we want to load this character in a regular game scene. We do not want to be dependent on this UI, meaning we do not want to handle the character customization directly inside the UI script. Instead, let's make a proper script that applies to the character itself. So over here, let's create a new C# script, call it player character customize. So now let's select the character itself. So here I've got the character. So this is the object that I'm going to attach a script to right next to the animator. So let's attach a script and now let's open it. Okay, so now like we saw, this asset pack, this is all based on modifying the mesh object. And if we look at how the character is set up, let's say over here the color, so this is the body. This has a skin mesh renderer, which inside has a mesh field. This is the only thing we need to modify. So basically, we just need a reference to this skin mesh renderer and a reference to all of the various meshes that we want to apply. So up here on this script, let's add our references. So let's make a serialized field, private. Let's begin with the skin mesh renderer. And then let's make another one. This is going to be our mesh array, and we're going to make it a mesh array. We're making an array so we can assign all the meshes with all different colors. Back here in the editor, here's the character script. And yep, we do have our skin mesh renderer and our mesh array. So for starters, let's just do it with the body. So let's just drag the body skin mesh renderer. Make sure you drag the actual object that contains the skin mesh renderer. So I dragged exactly that one. And then for the mesh array, let's add it. So here's another quick tip. You can actually copy paste elements. So if I go inside the body, over here I've got the body mesh. So now I could click on it in order to be able to see it over here on the project. Or I can right click on this field and copy, then go back inside the basic character and right click and paste. And yep, there you go, there's the body. Now let's add another element and let's select the next body. So this is the one that is in yellow, and let's select the next one which is in blue. Then let's add another one. Let's select the brown and add another one. Let's select the orange and another one, and let's select the red. Now obviously you would want to select all of them instead of just a handful of them, but now for testing, just these will do. So back in the code, all we need is really just a function to change the color, something pretty simple. Let's make it public because we're going to call this from our UI script. Let's make it void and call it change color. And now here, let's simply grab the next available mesh. So first, that means that we need to figure out which mesh are we currently using. So we go inside the skin mesh renderer and we have the mesh. This is the mesh that we're currently using, the shared mesh. We just need to figure out the index inside the mesh array. And for that, we can go inside the mesh array and we can call a function to get the index of. So let's go inside system.array and let's get the index of. This takes a parameter, the mesh array. So let's use our mesh array and then we have the value. So that's the value. This is going to return an int for the mesh index. This is the index of the mesh that we have currently selected. And now we really just want to assign the next one. So for the next one, we go inside the mesh array and we're going to want to access it on the mesh index +1. Except if we do it like this, obviously we're going to go past the array max. We want to make sure to loop back to it. So as always, let's use the modulo operator, modulo of the mesh array.length. And let's put this inside parentheses so we get the modulo of the total. So with this, as we increase the mesh index, once it goes past the mesh array.length, it loops back into 0. That way we can constantly change the color. Then finally, we just need to assign this back into our shared mesh. Okay, so this is constantly going to change the color. Okay, that should do it. So we really just need to call this function. So over here on the UI field, obviously we need a reference. So let's add a reference to our player character customized. Okay, we have this. And now when we click on the color button, let's go inside this and just call change color. Okay, that should do it. Let's test. Here in the editor, let's just assign the reference. So inside the character customization UI, over here, let's just drag the basic character. Okay, let's test. So here we are, and the character has a yellow body. Now I click on this button, and there you go. It turns blue, and turns brown, and turns orange, and then sort of a red. And now if I click again, and yep, there you go, it goes back into yellow, and swap it out, and yep, there you go, it's swapping all of the colors. Okay, awesome. So this is really the core concept behind this system. We really just need one more thing to get the absolute basics working. We need to handle all of the various body parts. Now here on this code, you might think of the obvious first approach. So we have this skin mesh render and an array of meshes. So we would really just need to copy paste this for every single body part. We'd write different variables for each body part. Now technically this would work, but obviously this does not look good. So let's do it in a much more elegant manner. Instead of tons of copy pasting, let's make a class that represents the data for a single body part. So let's do a public class. Let's call it body part data. And now inside we have pretty much those two. Except over here, since this is going to be a subclass field, let's make them public. This is basically just going to be a container of data. So let's do a mesh array for the mesh array, and also a skin mesh render for the skin mesh render. And now instead of having tons of arrays and tons of skin mesh renders for every single body part, we just have an array of body part data. So just an array of this for the body part data array. Now let's just comment out these errors just so the code compiles so we see the editor. And here in the editor, I'm looking at the custom basic character, and nope, there is no field. Nothing shows up. That's because custom classes do not show up by default in the editor. In order to make this class, this type visible in the editor, in order to do that, we need to mark it as serializable. So we need to add the attribute system.serializable. If we do this and save, and if there it is, now we do have our body part data array, and inside we have a list, so let's add an element, and if there you go, it is an element that contains both of our pieces of data. So we've got the skin mesh render, and we have the mesh array. So let me just assign this, so assign the body skin mesh render, and let's also assign the body mesh. Let's assign the various ones, so I've got the body, let's put the body in blue, let's put the body in brown, and let's say the body in red. Okay, now let's add another element for this, for a different body part. And instead of the body, let's add a different one. So let's say the hat, let's modify the hat. Then again, all we need is to assign the mesh array with all of the various hats. So let's go inside the hat in order to find all of the various hats. They are over here inside the meshes, inside the hat, and yep, here we have all the various hats. As you can see, there's tons of them. That is why this character pack, this one can make pretty much infinite variation. So here I have assigned some hats, and I'm going to also add another special thing, which is I'm going to add an element, and then I'm going to click to select it and press on delete in order to clear that one. So this one has no mesh. That is because obviously we also want to add the ability in order to have no hat. Okay, so with this now we have the body with the various colors and the hat with various hats. So now here in the code, let's modify our function in order to change the color. So let's uncomment this. And again, we've got the skin mesh render. And really, we just need to access the data inside of the body part data, which is inside of these ones. So for example, for the color, I know the color is going to be on index 0. So let's go index 0, grab the mesh array. Then on index 0, grab the skin mesh render. And same thing for these. Okay, just like this. And by the way, right now, if you are thinking that hard-coded indexes, if you're thinking that looks like some pretty bad code, if so, then great job on having that thought. Just hold that thought, wait a little bit, we're going to see that in a little bit. So here we've got the change color, and let's make another function. So this is going to be the change hat. And really, the only thing that we modify is just the index. Instead of being on index 0, let's go into index 1. Okay, so now over here on the UI script, let's do the same thing. So let's add another button for the hat button. And we're going to do pretty much exact same thing. So on the hat button, we add a click, and this is our hat button, and we're going to go and change the hat. Okay, we just need to drag this reference. So here in the editor, here is the UI script. Let's duplicate the color button, and over here, let's put another one underneath. This is going to be the hat button, and inside for the text, let's say hat. Then on the script, just drag the reference. Okay, so with this, let's test. All right, so now if I click on the color, and there you go, it does change the body color. Okay, so far so good. And click on the hat, and if there you go, it does change the hat. So I can modify the hat. I can get it like this sombrero and make it in something like a yellow, and there you go, everything does work perfectly. All right, awesome. So obviously this system is much better than the original idea of just copy pasting all these fields for every single body part, using an actual class that holds all of the various data and then using an array of that class type. That is much better code. However, we can still improve upon this further. Like I mentioned, hardcode indexes, these are not a good thing. Just looking at this code, you can't really tell that index 0 is supposed to be the color and index 1 is supposed to be the hat. There's nothing here that means that's exactly what it means. If over here in the editor, I just take the element 1 and I just drag it above there, and if we try like this, then right now if I modify the color, I'm actually modifying the hat, so this is obviously broken. So we do not want to make it based on indexes. Really, what we need is to replace the index with something that makes a lot more sense, like for example an enum. So up here, let's make an enum. Let's make public enum. Let's call it the body part type. And here, let's assign all of the various body parts. So we have the color, and then we have the hat. With this, we have a much better way of referencing each body part type. So now inside the body part data, we have a list of body part data. In order to know which type it is, let's simply add a field inside of here. So a public body part type and body part type. So we just do this. And now here in the editor, we can assign the proper body part types. So for this one with various bodies, this is indeed the color, and this one is indeed going to be the hats. So this helps organize our things much better. Now we do not have any hardcode indexes, and now we need to modify these functions. And let's actually make a separate function. So let's make a public void change body part, and inside we're going to receive a parameter of type body part type. So the body part type. And for the logic, we're going to do pretty much exactly the same logic, except obviously we're not going to use indexes. We're going to actually find the body part type that contains this data. So let's actually make a helper function to do that. So let's do here a private, we're going to return body part data, and let's call it get body part data. And we've got the body part type, and now here we just really cycle through our array, so body part data inside our body part data array. We cycle through it, then we see if this body part data, if this one dot body part type matches the one that we are looking for. If so, then obviously we want this one, so let's return body part data. Now this should always find something, so it should never get down here, but in order to make our function valid, we need to return something, so let's just return null. Although of course, we should really add the arrays for all the body parts, so we should never actually get to this point. Anyway, so here we now have a function from which we can get the body part data. So here, let's grab the body part data, and let's simply grab it and pass in this type. So we have this, and now over here on the function, we do literally the same logic, and we just replace all of this with this. And with that, we actually also end up removing all of this duplicate code, so we no longer have a function to change every single different body part. We just have one. We pass in the body part type, and it changes perfectly. All we need is over here on the character customization UI, so when changing the color, instead of using that function, we use the other one, change body part. And now here we access the body part type, and we're going to modify the color. And on this one, change body part, and this one we want to modify the hat. Okay, so let's test. So here we are, and click the button to change the color, and yep, it works, change the hat, and yep, everything works. Alright, awesome! Now with this, honestly, the system is fully working. All that remains is really just filling in these arrays with all of the various body parts. This is honestly the part that took the most amount of effort when making my own game. As you can see, there's 100 hats, so I basically had to drag 100 references. So making a system like this is quite laborious in order to drag all the references, but as you can see, the logic is actually pretty straightforward. Before I show the final system, let's just cover one more very important thing, which is saving and loading. And again, this is actually going to be quite simple. I'm going to do it the same way that I've always done, the same way that I covered in a tutorial video quite a long time ago. We're going to make a save object, and we're going to save it as a JSON string. So over here on the player character customize, usually I like to put the saving and loading at the end of the file. So up here, let's make a class for the save object. And over here, we just need to save the customization data, except obviously we have an issue. Right now, the data for the customization, that data is actually saved on the mesh itself. The skin mesh render contains the shared mesh for the one that we have selected. Now we can't directly serialize a mesh, so we can't really go into the save object and over here add a mesh field. We can't really do that. So instead, let's use an index instead. We need to store both the index and the body part type, so let's make another type for it. Let's make a public class for the body part type index. And now inside, we just need two pieces of data. So the body part type, and then also an int for the actual selected index. And again, in order to make this work with our save system, we need to make sure this one is serializable. So we have this, and now over here on the save object, we can just store a body part type index array. Or actually, let's make this a list just so that it makes it a bit easier to actually save. So let's make it a list of body type index list. And now all we need is really just a private void save function. And over here, we just need to construct this list. So let's make a temporary variable here, just making a list of this. And we just need to cycle through all of the various body parts. Now for that, here's a quick tip. You can easily cycle through all of the values in a certain enum. So up here, let's do exactly that. So let's do a for each of body part type, and we're going to cycle through it. And let's go inside system.enum. And inside we've got the get values. And basically this returns an array of all the values of a certain enum. And we want for the body part type. And we just need to make a type of this type. That is going to cycle through all of the elements, all of the various types inside that enum. So we cycle through them. Then we just need to get the body part data and pretty much just get the mesh index. So let's actually copy the exact same thing here. So we've got the body part type. From that we get the body part data. And then from inside the body part data, we can get the index that is actually assigned right now. So that gives us the mesh index. And by the way, we can simplify this code since up here we already added using system. So we can get rid of all of this extra system. So like this, just to simplify things a little bit. Okay, so we have the mesh index, and then simply go inside this list and let's add, and we're going to add new element of type body part type index. And inside let's assign the index onto this mesh index, and the body part type is this body part type. Okay, so basically we are cycling through every single body part type. We are grabbing the actual selected index based on what is selected on the skin mesh render. So we get that index, we get the body part type, and we add it to the list. So we have a list of all of the body part types along with the selected index. And then we can finally create the save object. So save object, a new save object. And inside we just assign the body type index into the one that we just created. And now finally, as usual, let's go inside the JSON utility to convert this to JSON. Let's put the save object, and this is going to be our string for our JSON. Let's also do a debug.log, just see what this contains. And finally, in order to save this, let's use the simplest save method. So really just using player prefs. So player prefs in order to save, or actually it's not the save, it's the set string. And let's call it player customization. That's for the key, and for the value, let's store our JSON. That's the save done, so now let's just do a private void load. And this one is really just going to be the opposite. So first let's go into player prefs in order to get the string of type player customization, which by the way, this is a quick demo, so normally I would leave it like this, but in order to teach some good correct practices, let's actually not use strings for our key. Instead, let's go up here and actually write a proper key. So private string for player prefs save, and we use it here. And then down here, we can now avoid using strings. So let's use, and this way we make sure we always use the same string and there are no issues. Okay, so anyways, we get the string, and that is going to return our string for JSON. So this is going to be our save JSON string. Then as usual, go inside JSON utility and load from JSON. We're going to load of the type save object, and the JSON is from this JSON. So that is going to return our save object for the save object. Okay, so now we have the save object, and inside we've got the body type index list. So now let's just cycle through it. So for each the body part type index, let's go inside this one, inside the save object dot body part type index list. Then now we do really the same thing in order to go inside the index. Inside the index, let's grab the body part type. That grabs us the body part data, and then we can assign it. So pretty much the same thing that we were doing up here, except instead of grabbing the next one, we go inside the body type data, inside the mesh array, and you grab from the body part type index, we grab the selected index. Okay, so that should really do it. We just need to make some save and load buttons. So let's actually make this public so that the UI script can call these functions. Make them both public, okay? And over here on the UI script, let's just add two more buttons. One is going to be the load and one is going to be the save. And then we're going to run the same logic. So these are buttons. So let's go into the load button. When we click, let's do something. Let's say load and go inside that one and call load. And then we have the save button and does pretty much exactly the same thing. Okay, that's it for the code, so let's just make these. Here, let's go inside the UI, we have our buttons. Let's just do two more. So move it down here, one for loading, one for saving. So that's going to be the load button underneath the save button. Then just modify the text inside of it. So this is the load, and this one is going to be the save. And finally, just drag the references, so the load button and the save button. Okay, so let's test. Alright, so here is the character, and let's customize it. So let's put like this hat and this skin color. Here we can see the logs, and as we click on save, we should be able to see our JSON. So if I click on save, and there you go, it's saved, and it saved the body part type index list, and it's saved inside the two lists. So the body part type 0 and the body part type 1. This one has the index of 3, and this one has the index of 2. So yep, it looks like it did save. This is correct JSON. So now let's stop playing, and I'll play again. And the character is back on defaults, and now if we click on load, and if there you go, the exact same character that we just saved. Alright, awesome. So with that, as you can see, everything is working. So here is the completed system in my game. It works exactly the same thing that we saw in the tutorial. So I've got the various parts to change the color, change the hair, the hat, the shirt, and so on. By the way, for synchronizing the customization in multiplayer, I'm doing it like this. I've got a network list of type player data. This is a custom type that I made. And this custom type implements iNetwork serializable, and over here inside I've got a fixed string with 512 bytes for the player customization. Now, the size is important. Obviously, the JSON string needs to fit inside of this. And if you want a more step-by-step guide on how I made the player data and all of this stuff, this is pretty much exactly what I made in my free multiplayer course. So you can go watch that to see how I synchronize the player data. Over here, I literally just added an extra field. The only tricky thing is really just over here figuring out the actual amount of bytes for the fixed string. The first time that I tried to save, I used the code pretty much exactly like I covered in the tutorial. So the save object had some proper parameter names, but in order to make it a bit shorter, over here, as you can see, I made the parameter names literally just one character. That makes it so that the JSON save file is much shorter, which does then fit inside that fixed string. Then here is the character customization scene in the final game. Everything is pretty much exactly the same as we just made. So I've got a canvas. And just as a bit of fun, I made this one a screen space camera instead of a screen space overlay, just to be able to have this nice slant to the UI. I think this looks quite good. That's really the only difference. The canvas is all set up exactly the same. Then inside, I've got the character creator UI, and inside, I've got all of the various buttons for the various body parts. I made an individual script on each button just to make it a bit easier in order to figure out which part does which button refer to. And here is the final player character customized script. So I've got an enum for the body part type. I just added all of the other body parts. Then the usual body part type index. Then I just made a subclass for the customization. Basically, if I want to customize a character, in order to save that data, I'm really just going to save this subclass instead of the entire player character customized. So just separated it a little bit more, but all the logic is exactly the same. Then another slight difference was instead of querying every single skin mesh random to see what mesh it's using, instead of that, I really just stored a body part type index array. So this basically stores the current customization state for the actual player character. That way there's no need to actually query the skin mesh renders for every single body part in order to figure out which one is being used. I already know which one is being used because it's stored in this array. Then the same thing, just a function to change the index. Another one to set it, another one to get it, then a function to randomize, which does exactly what you expect, so just randomizes a certain body part. This complete body part data, this is what contains all of the various body parts. So the same body part data type array has the skin mesh renderer, the array of the meshes, and the body part type, and then the complete one simply contains an array of that. Then some helper functions for getting it, also for refreshing it, and calculating the maximum index of each type, so really just a bit more of a polished system than what I covered in the tutorial. Then down here, just some events for when the character customization changes, containing all of the data and the current customization. Just doing some logic in order to get the default one, setting a different customization, randomizing it, resetting, changing index, and so on. So the code is slightly different, but it's all pretty much exactly the same. Exactly the same logic, works in the same way as in the tutorial code. So here it is in game, and I can customize the character and modify literally anything. Then I can save the character and go into play mode. And yep, here is my custom character walking around, and all the players see the exact same character. Okay, so that's the character customization system. You can go ahead and download the project files linked in the description. It includes the complete final class, just like I'm using in my own Steam game. And if you also pick up the asset pack that is currently on sale, if you import it onto the same project, it should load all the assets correctly. So just with that, you should have a character customization system ready to go. The Cyber Week sale ends soon, so if you need a nice stylized character customization pack for your game, then definitely get it quickly. Or like I mentioned in the beginning, if you prefer the Cinti style, the logic for using that one should be mostly the same. That asset is also on a Black Friday sale on the Cinti store, so if you prefer that one, get it quickly. If you buy it through the link in the description, it's the same price to you and I get a nice commission. So check out both links alongside the free project files. Alright, hope that's useful. Check out these videos to learn some more. Thanks to these awesome Patreon supporters for making these videos possible. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.